Hey friends! Welcome to Raven Reads So That You Don't Have to. I'm your host Raven, and I'm here with my friend Serana, who's ready to listen to today's bedtime story. We hope you guys are having a wonderful and amazing day, or night, and thank you for coming to listen to the story. So today we're hanging out at Serana's castle, since it's kind of fitting for the story that we're gonna read, and looks so spooky. So, let's check out what book we're gonna read today. It's The Horror of Castle Zir. Sounds spooky. Let's see what's gonna happen. This is another play, so here's the people in the story. Clavitus, captain of the Imperial Guard, Cyrodiilic. Anara, a dead mermaid. Ulis, a lieutenant of the Imperial Guard, Argonian. And Zalassa, a young Argonian mage. So it looks like it's late evening. The play opens in the interior great entrance hall of a castle in Scathlanud, replete with fine furnishings and tapestries. Torches provide the only illumination. In the center of the foyer is a great iron door, the main entrance to the castle. The staircase up to the landing above is next to this door. On stage left is the door to the library, which is currently closed. On stage right is a huge suit of armor, 20 feet tall, nearly touching the ceiling of the room. Though no one can be seen, there is the sound of a woman singing coming from the library door. A loud thumping knock on the iron front door stops the woman singing. The door to the library opens, and Anara, a common-looking maid, comes out and hurries to open the front door. Clavitus, a handsome man in imperial garb, stands there. And Anara says to him, "Good evening to you, Sergio." And Clavitus says, "Good evening. Is your master at home?" And Anara says, "No, Sergio, it's only me here. My master, Sidura Kenna Telvani Hordolf Seer, is at his winter estate. Is there something I can do for you?" And Clavitus says, "Possibly. Would you mind if I came in?" And Anara says, "Not at all, Sergio. Please, may I offer you some flin?" Clavitus comes into the hall and looks around, and he says, "No, thank you. What's your name?" And Anara responds, "Anara, Sergio." And Clavitus asks, "Anara, when did your master leave Scathlanud?" And Anara responds, "More than a fortnight ago. That's why it's only me in the castle, Sergio. All the other servants and slaves who tend to his lordship travel with him. Is there something wrong?" And Clavitus says, "Yes, there is. Do you know an Ashlander by the name of Sul Kharifa?" And Anara says, "No, Sergio. I don't know no one by that name." And Clavitus says, "Then you aren't likely to now. He's dead. He was found a few hours ago, dying of frostbite in the Ashlands. He was hysterical, nearly incomprehensible, but among his last words were castle and seer." And Anara says, "Dying of frostbite in summertide in the Ashlands? Vivek, that's strange. I suppose it's possible that my master knew this man, but being an Ashlander, and my master being of the house of Telvani, well, if you'll pardon me for being flippant, Sergio, I don't think they could have been friends." And Clavitus asks, "That is your master's library? Would you mind if I looked in?" And Anara says, "Please, Sergio, go wherever you want. We got nothing to hide. We're loyal imperial subjects." And Clavitus says, "As I hear, are all Telvani." And then there's a note from the playwright. "This line should be delivered without sarcasm. Trust the audience to laugh. It never fails, regardless of the politics of the locals." Clavitus enters the library and looks over the books. And he says, "The library needs dusting." And Anara says, "Yes, Sergio, I was just doing that when you knocked on the door." And Clavitus says, "I'm grateful for that. If you had finished, I wouldn't notice the space in the dust, where a rather large book has recently been removed. Your master is a wizard, it seems." And Anara says, "No, Sergio. I mean, he studies a lot, but he don't cast no spells, if that's what you mean by wizard. He's a Kenna, went to college and everything. You know, now that I think about it, I know what happened to that book. One of the other Kennas from the college been round yesterday, and borrowed a couple of books. He's a friend of the master, so I thought it'd be all fine." And Clavitus asks, This Kenna, was his name Vorvim? And Inara says, could have been. I don't remember. And Clovitus says, there was a suspected necromancer at the college named Kenna Vorvim we arrested last night. We don't know what he was doing at the college, but it was something illegal, that's for certain. Was that the Kenna who borrowed the book? A little fellow with a bad leg. And Inara says, no, Sergio, it weren't the Kenna from yesterday. He was a big fella who could walk, so I noticed. And Clovitus says, I'm going to have a look around the rest of the house if you don't mind. Clovitus goes up the stairs and delivers the following dialogue from the landing in the rooms above. Inara continues straightening up the downstairs, moving a high-backed bench in front of the armor to scrub the floor. And then she says, can I ask, Sergio, what you're looking for? Maybe I could help you. And Clovitus asks, are these all the rooms in the castle? No secret passages? And Inara says, laughing, oh, Sergio, what would Sedura Kenna Talvani Hordolf Seer want with secret passages? And Clovitus, looking at the armor, says, your master is a big man. And Inara says, laughing, oh, Sergio, don't tease. That's giant armor just for decoration. My master slew that giant 10 years ago, and kinda keeps it for a souvenir. And Clovitus says, that's right. I remember hearing something about that when I first took my post here. It was someone named Seer who killed the giant, but I didn't think his first name was Hordolf. Memory fades, I'm afraid. What was the giant's name? And Inara says, I'm afraid I don't remember, Sergio. And Clovitus says, I do. It was Torfang. I got out of Torfang's shield. And Inara says, I don't understand, Sergio. Torfang's shield? Clovitus runs down the stairs and examines the armor. And he says, Sol Karifa said something about getting out of Torfang's shield. I thought he was just raving, out of his mind. And Inara says, but he ain't got a shield, Sergio. Clovitus pushes the high-back bench out of the way, revealing the large mounted shield at the base of the armor. And he says, yes, he does. You covered it up with that bench. And Inara says, I didn't do it on purpose, Sergio. I was just cleaning. I see that armor every day, Sergio, and Vivek, I swear I ain't never noticed the shield before. And Clovitus says, it's fine, Inara. I believe you. Clovitus pushes on the shield, and it pulls back to reveal a tunnel down. And he says, it appears that Sedura Kenna Telvani Hordolf Seer does have a need for a secret passage. Could you get me a torch? And Inara says, Vivek, I ain't never seen that before. Inara takes the torch from the wall and hands it to Clovitus. Clovitus enters the tunnel, and he says, wait here. Inara watches Clovitus disappear down the tunnel. She appears agitated and finally runs for the front door. When she opens it, Ulis, an Argonian lieutenant in the Imperial Guard, is standing at the entrance. She screams. And Ulis says, I'm sorry to frighten you. And Inara says, not now. Go away. And Ulis says, I'm afraid the captain wouldn't like that, miss. And Inara says, you're with the captain? Blessed mother. Clovitus comes out of the tunnel white-faced. It takes him a few moments to speak. And Ulis asks, Captain, what's down there? And Clovitus says to Inara, did you know your master's a necromancer? That your cellar is filled with bodies? Inara faints. Ulis carries her to the bench and lays her down. And he says, let me see, Sergio. And Clovitus says, you'll see soon enough. We're going to need every soldier from the post here to cart away all the corpses. Ulis, I've seen enough battles, but I've never seen anything like this. No two are alike. Khajiit, Slode, Dunmer, Cyrodiil, Breton, Nord. Burned alive, poisoned, electrified, melted, torn apart, turned inside out, ripped to shreds and sewn back up together. And Ulis says, you think the Ashlander escaped? That's what happened? And Clovitus says, I don't know. Why would someone do something like this, Ulis? There's a knock on the door. Clovitus answers it. A young Argonian woman, Zolassa, is standing holding a package and a letter. And Zolassa says, good morning. You're not Lord Seer, are you? And Clovitus says, no. What do you have there? And Zolassa says, a letter and a package I'm supposed to deliver to him. Will he be back shortly? And Clevitis says, I don't believe so. Who gave you the package to deliver? And Thalassa says, my teacher at the college, Kema Warvim. He had a bad leg, so he asked me to bring these to his lordship. Actually, to tell you the truth, I was supposed to deliver them last night, but I was busy. And Ulyss says, greetings, sister. We'll give the package to his lordship when we see him. And Thalassa says, ah, hail, brother. I had heard there was a handsome Argonian in Skathanad. Unfortunately, I promised Kema Warvim that I'd deliver the package directly to his lordship's hands. I'm already late, I can't just... And Clevitis says, we're Imperial Guard, miss. We will take the package and the letter. Thalassa reluctantly hands Clevitis the letter and the package. She turns to go. And Ulyss says, you're at the college if we need to see you? And Thalassa says, yes, fair tidings, brother. And Ulyss says, good night, sister. Clevitis opens the package as Thalassa exits. It is a book with many loose sheets. And Clevitis says, it appears we found the missing book, delivered to our very hands. Clevitis begins to read the book silently to himself. And Ulyss says to himself, very pleased, another Argonian in Skathanad, and a pretty one at that. I hope we weren't too rude to her. I'm tired of all these women with their smooth, wet skin. It would be wonderful if we could meet when I'm off duty. While Ulyss talks, he opens the letter and reads it. And Ulyss continues, she looks like she's from the south like me. You know, Argonians from northern Blackmarsh are much less. Ulyss continues reading, transfixed by the letter. Clevitis skips to the back of the book and reads the last sentences. And then he says while reading the book, in black ink, the Khajiit male showed surprisingly little fortitude to a simple lightning spell, but I've had interesting physiological results with a medium-level acid spell cast slowly over several days. In red ink on the margins. Yes, I see. Was the acid spell cast uniformly over the entire body of the subject? In black ink, the Nord female was subjected to 16 hours of a frost spell, which eventually crystallized her into a state of suspended animation, from which she eventually expired. Not so the Nord male, nor the Ashlander male who lapsed into their comas much earlier, but then recovered. The Ashlander then tried to escape, but I restrained him. The Nord then had an interesting chemical overreaction to a simple fire spell and expired. See the accompanying illustration. In red ink, yes, I see, the pattern of boils and lesions suggests some sort of internal incineration, perhaps caused by the combination of a short burst of flame following a longer session with frost. It's such a shame I can't come see the experiment personally, but I compliment you on your excellent notation. In black ink, thank you for the suggestion about slowly poisoning my maid Anara. The dosages you've suggested have had fascinating results, eroding her memory very subtly. I intend to increase it exponentially, and see how long it is before she notices. Speaking of which, it is a pity that I haven't any Argonian subjects, but the slave traders promised me some healthy specimens in the autumn. I should like to test their metabolism in comparison to elves and humans. It's my theory that a medium-level lightning spell, cast in a continuous wave on an Argonian, wouldn't be lethal for several hours at least, similar to my results with the Cyrodiilic female, and of course the giant. In red ink, it'd be a shame to wait until autumn to see. And then Ulyss says while reading the letter, in red ink, here is your Argonian. Please let me know the results. It's signed Kema Warvim. And Clevitis says, by Kennerith, this isn't necromancy, it's destruction. Kema Warvim and Kenna Telvanni Hordolf Seer haven't been experimenting with death, but with the limits of magical torture. And then Ulyss says, the letter isn't addressed to Kenna Telvanni Hordolf Seer. It's addressed to Sedura Iachilla Seer, his wife, do you think? And Clevitis says, Iachilla, that was the Telvanni of the Seer family, who I heard about in connection with the giant slaying. We'd best get the maid out of here. She'll need to go to a healer. Clevitis wakes up Anara. She appears disoriented. And Anara says, what's happening? Who are you? And Clovitus says, "Don't worry, everything is going to be fine. We're going to take you to a healer." And Ulla says, "Do you need a coat, Iachilla?" And Inara says, "Thank you, no, I'm not cold." And then Inara, or Iachilla, stops, realizing that she's been caught. Clovitus and Ulyss unsheathe their blades, and Clovitus says, "You have black ink on your fingers, your ladyship." And Ulyss says, "And when you saw me at the door, you thought I was the Argonian your friend Warvim sent over. That's why you said not now, go away." And then Iachilla says, "You're much more observant than Inara. She never did understand what was happening. Even when I tripled the poison spell, and she expired in what I observed as considerable agony." And Ulyss says, "What were you going to use on me first, lightning or fire?" And then Iachilla says, "Lightning. I find fire to be too unpredictable." As she speaks, the flames in the torches extinguish. The stage is utterly dark. There is the sound of a struggle, swords clanging. Suddenly a bolt of lightning flashes out, and there is silence. From the darkness, Iachilla speaks. And she says, "Fascinating." There are several more flashes of lightning as the curtain closes. The end. Oh, wow. She got him in the end. They really had no idea it was her all along. Wow, that's a pretty spooky story. I don't know if that means she's a necromancer or not. I think we've seen plenty of people being tortured by destruction magic in a necromancer's lair. Alright guys, well, that was the bedtime story today. I hope everyone liked it. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for coming to the story. I'll see you guys again next time. Bye for now.